Hello, everyone. This is Malvina Miller Complainville from Fortuna Admissions, and I'm here with my colleague, Bill Kooser, who's going to speak to us about Booth, the application process, and the interviews. But before we jump in, Bill, can you give us a short introduction on your background?
Sure, happy to do that, Malvina, and welcome to everybody who's watching this video. So again, my name is Bill Kooser, and actually I got my MBA at Chicago Booth many years ago. Spent a number of years in management consulting, and then went back to Booth long ago, 1987, and spent basically about 30 years working at Chicago Booth in a variety of capacities. I ran full-time admissions for a couple of years. I ran career services. Many years I ran the executive MBA program and was very involved in a lot of our international operations. So spent some time in Hong Kong and traveled quite a bit to Europe and Asia to help support a lot of the activities of the school.
Fantastic. And that's something that you and I, Bill, have in common. I worked at the career services at HBS.
Yeah, and actually I think having some experience in career services gives you an interesting perspective on admissions as well. So the two are very closely tied in a lot of interesting ways.
That is so true. And I find that it helps me in the work that I do with clients all the time. Because so much of the application process is understanding your career vision. Tell us about the application process for Booth. Provide us with an overview of what that looks like.
Sure. Booth's application process is very similar to those of other schools. You'll be asked to submit a GMAT or GRE score. You'll be asked to submit a transcript from any university you've attended in the past. You will be expected to submit 2 letters of recommendation, ideally one from a supervisor. And there will be several essays that you'll have to respond to as well. The first is basically a why Booth, a why MBA kind of essay. And the second one is a little bit more along the lines of, what makes you interesting? What are some of the things that make you different than some other candidates? There are also a couple of very short answer questions that get specifically to your motivations and your career goals. So one asking what is your immediate post-MBA career goal, and the second one asking a little bit more about your longer term goals after getting the MBA. So that's the basic application process. The school will then review that material and decide if they'd like to interview you. If they decide they would like to interview you, there's actually another step which is new this year. They'll ask for a 1-minute video where you will be asked to respond to one of 2 questions. The first question this past year, we don't know whether these questions will be the same next year, but this past year, the first question was, what have you recently learned that's changed your worldview? So particularly these days with a lot of things going on in the United States and the pandemic and COVID-19, I think they're trying to get at, what has really changed your view of the world over the course of the last year with so many strange things going on. But the second question you could respond to would be, more along the lines of what's different about you that you would like other people to know? What might they not know about you that would be kind of interesting? And so you have 60 seconds, a minute to kind of provide that video interview. And that will be just kind of an additional prep for the interview process. If you're asked to come in to do an interview, you will be, actually these days it's going to be by video, not coming in to do the interview, but you'll be paired up with either a student or an alum. And there will be a chance to talk through your resume, talk a bit about your background, and it's really a chance to assess fit and your communication skills, and to get a sense of whether Booth is the right place for you.
I'm going to jump back into this pre-video interview that they have to do. So they have 60 seconds, and they're able to choose from one of those 2 topics.
One of those 2 questions, okay. Yes, either one.
Okay, and are they able to re-record themselves if they're not happy with an answer?
Yes, okay. It looks like they are able to re-record, and if they don't like it much, and they do specifically say they're not going to be evaluated on editing and lighting and all the rest of that, right. Simply on content.
Okay.
That's easy to say. It's hard to kind of divorce yourself from all of the stuff that might be going on in the background. So take that with a bit of a grain of salt, but should do a little practice first. Make sure that you can get the ideas down to 60 seconds, and then go for actually getting the recording done.
Okay, that's interesting. I find that it seems that more and more schools are doing these pre-interview videos.
Yeah, this was brand new. As I say, it just was announced back in October that this was going to happen. So a new thing for Booth, although they've done it with a couple of specialized programs in the past. This is the first time that they've done it for the full MBA.
Okay, thank you. So with this year's pandemic, the interviews have all changed, at least in terms of how they take place, and that's the case for Booth as well. So I imagine they're taking place virtually through something like Zoom.
Right.
And who is the candidate interviewing with?
So typically the candidate, and yes, they will be Zoom virtual interviews. The candidate will typically talk with either a student or an alumnus. And I
Okay.
think these days it's more likely to be an alumnus, frankly, given the demands on students. So the alum may or may not be in your particular industry area, but more likely will be someone who is available and where you can easily set up a time to talk. So the interview will really be, think about it with an alum or someone who has been into school for just a year or so and trying to get a little bit better sense of who you are.
And typically they would have only seen the candidate's resume. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
They will not have a full application. So it'll be based on your the things that you have in your resume at that level.
Okay, great. So if you were to give our candidates who've received an interview some advice on how to prepare for these types of interviews, what would you say?
Well, I think preparation overall is key. And so the first thing I would suggest is find someone who can walk you through a mock interview, whether that's a coach like one of us or a friend, to give you a sense of how to answer those questions. I find that for many clients, they have some wonderful ideas, things that they'd really like to communicate and talk about. But thinking through them in your head or even writing them down is very different than getting them out orally. And so having the chance to practice actually saying the words, getting the story out, honing it so that it is concise, but really covers all the material is very, very important. So actually having a chance to practice the interview skills, I think, is critical. Prior to that, clearly you want to think about what it is you might want to say. What are the key things about your background that are interesting, that are different, that you're particularly proud of? And figuring out ways to communicate that through the interview process. You'll also want to take a look at a broad set of potential interview questions. Things like, why did you make the decisions you did? What are the things you're most proud of? What is the accomplishment that you talk about most? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Why do you want to go to Booth? Why do you want to get an MBA? Those kinds of questions you can find them all over the place. We have a lot of them on our websites as well. And you should walk through all of those questions and figure out, what would I say if someone were to ask me this? And then practice that in person with a friend or a coach. I think would be very, very helpful.
I agree with you, Bill. I think that's excellent advice. And when you think about it, a lot of the material that the candidate's going to be talking about is material that they're familiar with. It's their experiences, their career path, what they've done outside of work. But it's really very different thinking about these things and actually articulating them out loud.
It
And
really is.
Yeah.
I find it all the time. I mean, clients will come back and have written out, here's what I'd like to say, and they're brilliant in many ways. And then we go through the practice and they just stumble over the words and a little bit more challenge and kind of, what did I really want to say there? And, you know, should I have my notes in front of me to read it? No, you don't want to read it. It has to sound natural, has to sound as if you're just having a conversation. So the practice is really, really important.
And so once the candidate has gone through the interview, how important is that interview as part of the rest of the application?
Well, it is a critical part of the application. A good interview will not make up for lots of other things that are weaknesses, but a bad interview can sink you if you have a strong application otherwise. So it is kind of a mix. We think about it as a holistic application process. So everything has to be reasonably good, and a number of things have to be very, very good. So as I say, the interview will not be the make or break in general, but if it's a really bad interview, that will not help you. So again, it's part of assessing fit, assessing communication skills, And those are important aspects of any MBA program, but particularly Booth. And so if you are not able to communicate that you are the kind of person that Booth wants to have, that will have a detrimental effect on your overall application.
And I imagine because it's either a student or an alumnus who's doing the interview, they have some type of form that they need to fill out and send
They
back
will
to
have,
admissions.
correct. They will have a form that will rate you on a variety of aspects of the interview communication skills, knowledge of Booth, sense of why you want to get the MBA, leadership activities and responsibilities, things like that. And they'll write up and ultimately will also say, I like this person, I don't like this person, you should admit or not. And that will go back into the file for the admissions committee to take a look at.
But it's not, as you said, it's not the final word. It'll just be one extra element among the rest of
it. Right, because they don't see the entire application,
right.
All they can do is look at the resume and get a sense of the person from the interaction. And the actual decision is made by the admissions team, and particularly the admissions director, who will make that final decision based on all of the elements, the written, the transcripts, the GMAT, as well as the interview.
Fantastic. Any final words of advice for our candidates?
Sure. One thing that I always tell Booth candidates is that Booth, perhaps more than some other schools, is very, very proud of its particular view of business education. It has a particular philosophy that is throughout the website. So I always encourage candidates to look closely at the website, particularly things like the note from the dean or the overview of the school, to get a sense of how Booth sees itself. So things like flexibility of curriculum, the discipline-based approach to education, the deep regard for analytics and data analysis. All of those things are very important and really go to the ethos of what makes Booth Booth. So for two reasons, a candidate should look closely at that. One is you need to make sure that that's what you're looking for in a school. But two, in the context of what we're talking about, you have to be able to demonstrate to the interviewer that you understand those points and why those points are important for you. So being able to talk about, I really like the flexibility of curriculum because what I really want to do is this, and these are the kinds of courses I would like to take, and Booth will allow me to do that and not force me to take things that perhaps I'm not as interested in. So understanding that overall philosophy, the direction and strategy of Booth, I think is important. It's probably true for every school, but particularly important for Booth.
And I find that often that depth of thinking when tackling, why this school is what can differentiate one candidate from another.
Right. It's too easy to kind of fall into the trap of saying the same thing to every school, and every school is different. And the people doing the interviewing, they have been through this process themselves, and they know what the differences are between the schools, and they want to make sure that not only are you a good fit for them, but that the school is a good fit for you. So it goes both ways, and understanding what is important about the school, what makes the school that school, is a very important part of the application process.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bill. I think that was really, really helpful.
You're very, very welcome. Great talking with you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And I think that's it. So